Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about standardized testing in Texas. I'm Patricia Williams and this is for Education 1301 P19. So what exactly is standardized testing in Texas? So in 1979, Texas legislature passed a law requiring assessments for 3rd, 5th, and 9th graders. This was to assess the necessary instruction that was needed and required. In 1980, it was a TABS test. In 1986, it was a TEAMS test up until 1990, which was the TOS test. And 2003 was a TAX test until 2012, the STAR test was implemented. So the STAR stands for State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness. This is only in Texas, and it is an annual assessment to assess necessary instruction that was needed and required. So it's assigned by the TEA, which is the Texas Education Association, which basically controls education standards in Texas. So basically, if you're a certified educator in Texas, you must follow these guidelines. TEA has Pearson administering this test, which basically means that they give out the test, they create the test, they come up with the answer sheets for the test, all this stuff. So Pearson is a British-owned education media company that has many contracts with states in the U.S., including New York and Texas. This test, the STAR test, starts in 3rd grade. Students will take it for reading and will take it almost every single year until they're a junior in high school with the U.S. history exam. So this STAR test measures proficiency based on TEKS, which is the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, which are basically statements of what teachers must teach the students during the whole school year. So it basically just sees where kids and teachers are comparatively within the state. So next we have my research question, which is going to be, should standardized testing be abolished in Texas? And we have the first side of the argument, which says, yes, the STAR should be abolished. And there's several arguments for this side, which include the STAR test is not fair to testers with test anxiety. So many students have test anxiety, and basically it causes students not to be able to answer questions to the best of their ability due to either nerves, anxiety, or outside surroundings, which causes results not to be accurate if they're not able to answer questions as they normally would. Next, we have the STAR does not accurately show student intelligence. According to Gardner's multiple intelligences, students have a variety of intelligences, right? It could be linguistic, naturalistic, interpersonal, and students see these test results from the STAR, and they might not feel smart enough if they don't do well, because this test is only testing on one of the intelligences. And if students aren't very high in this intelligence, they might feel dumb, they might feel not worth anything, which is not what we want students to do. Additionally, or it does put too much pressure on the students, which goes hand in hand with the other one, and it also causes teachers to teach the test. So teachers as well are very stressed out about this test, and they really, really want their students to pass. They want their students to excel and do well. So they are going to end up teaching exactly what's going to be on the test, which could be a good thing because they're being tested on the TEKS, what they should be learning. But teachers might decide to omit something that they would have normally taught that is maybe not on the STAR that year. They feel like they're wasting their time, but they might actually be taking away from that student's education, which is not a very good thing. Next we have limited in understanding, which basically means that The test is mostly multiple choice, which is, it doesn't open any doors for variance in answers. You're only testing kids on A, B, C, D, or E. And maybe students are good guessers. Maybe they can just guess them all right. Maybe they're terrible at multiple choice tests, and the right answer is being disguised, which is basically what their multiple choices are for. But the point is that it doesn't show a variety of questions or answers that can properly gauge students' understanding of a topic. So it's severely limited in their understanding of students' understanding. Next, it fails to help students learn. This test does nothing to help the students' education. They don't really see the results. I mean, they do see the results. They don't see how them taking a test can help them learn. It does nothing to help them learn. Lastly, demographics can predict scores. Sometimes, most of the time actually, scores can predict the scores of these students just based on these two factors. And the point that a lot of people have, or why are we testing students on something that we can already predict their aptitude and knowledge results based on these two factors that make up their demographics? Like, why are we having a test to test them on something like this? Anyways, moving on, we have statistics, data, and facts. So 10 to 40% of students suffer test anxiety, which we went over in the previous slide. It affects students' ability to finish the test, affects their ability to do well on it. Many people argue that the STAR test just reflects how well of a test taker a student is. Maybe a student does well under pressure, maybe they don't. All those things, they shouldn't affect a student's grade, and they do. And that's what a lot of people have a problem with, is that the STAR might just test how well a student is at taking a test. Next we have 70% of teachers find it not appropriate for their students based off of developmental skills. This test is a one-size-fits-all. It's every student in that grade level takes that one test. Maybe they're not even ready. Maybe they have a learning disability and they are not ready to take that test yet. And yet they all have to take that test at the same exact time. They all have to be taught the same exact TEKS, the same exact material, so that they are up to par with the rest of the state. Which could be a good thing, because that way you have a standard line of education in Texas. However, it could be a damper on a student's learning if they're having to catch up the whole time instead of learning at their own pace. Next, we have the $500 million contract with Pearson, which is the company that actually distributes the STAR test. A lot of people think that this is crazy and that there's no way that there should be $500 million to just administer the STAR test. But you have to think about how big Texas is and how many students there are in Texas. It actually evens out if you think about Pearson's contract with New York. We're spending here in Texas about the same to administer a test to every single student as New York is. So we're right where we should be. It just begs the question, like, if we're spending $500 million, like, maybe that money could be used somewhere else. Maybe it could be used to help students learn instead of just testing if they are learning, right? Next we have whites and Asians do better than African American and Latino students. So we already went over this in the previous slide, but 43% of white 8th graders scored proficient or above, versus 13% of African Americans who scored proficient or above. So there's that gap where 43% of whites scored proficient, while only 13% of African Americans. This is what's called closing the gaps, when we're trying to close the gaps between those ethnic groups. We see this huge gap just in taking these tests that maybe isn't fair. Additionally, 19% of Hispanics scored proficient or above, while 61% of Asians scored proficient above. So Asians are doing the best, and then whites next, and then Hispanics, and then African Americans. And lastly, we have questions on the STAR test about literature aren't fair. A lot of people just ask the question, are these questions just made up by some person? Well, obviously they are. Someone has to make the test. But in particular, I found this testimony about Sarah Holbrook, which is an author. And she had written a poem which was used in a STAR test, I believe in 2015, 2013. And she was trying to answer the questions about her own poem, and she didn't even know the right answers. And the ones that she did know, the answers weren't even there. So this is basically saying, like, you can't just test students on something that you don't even know yourself. And like the questions are sometimes redundant and they don't make sense, and students shouldn't be penalized for something that for literature should be open to discussion. Okay, moving on. Who supports this side of the argument? Who thinks that the STAR test should be abolished? So these are three people. Matt Shaheen, which is this guy right here. He is a Texas legislator who advocates for the reform or abolition of the STAR test. Then we have Sarah Holbrook, which is the author that I was talking about in the previous slide. She was the one who was unable to answer the STAR questions about her own poem. And then last we have Peter Green, who is an educator, has been an educator for 39 years, and he is a head writer for Forbes. Okay, here is the other side of the argument. No, the STAR should not be abolished. Okay, so first of all, it allows transparency. We're able to see how the teachers are doing and how the students are doing through this test. It shows progress, not only from the students, but by the teachers as well. And additionally, from the campus and district and even the state, it goes all those levels. It allows schools to be compared to other schools. It shows where they are academically. Which is not a bad thing. It inspires progress in a lot of cases. Students will see, oh, I did this, but I can do better next year. And it inspires the teachers to teach better even. It keeps teachers and students accountable. It makes sure that they're staying on track, that they're not getting distracted, that they're not just goofing off in the classroom all day long. It makes them so that they are doing their jobs, the teachers, and that students are also doing their jobs, which is listening and paying attention and learning. The STAR test reflects accurate results for college readiness. This is a good indicator. Maybe if you are severely reading, like under your reading level, and you're probably not going to be ready for college. So if you see that test score and it's really bad, maybe you need to work on reading, or maybe writing, or maybe math. The STAR test actually does provide study guide materials. Like, once you finish the test, you will be able to get a plan for learning, and for studying what you didn't do well on. It also provides a framework for thorough education. It shows what exactly the teacher has taught and maybe what the students didn't exactly understand. There are some gaps in here. Not every standardized test is perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to be an objective reference for areas needing improvement. It's not supposed to be the end of the world if you don't pass or if you do bad. It's just supposed to show where students are in relation to other students. Okay, Statistics, data, and facts. 54% of students tested were reading below their grade level. That is bad considering that's more than half of the students. This, however, doesn't mean that the star causes them to fail. It shows that they are failing, basically. It's not something to make you, it doesn't try to make you fail. It wants to show you where you are, so you can see progress, so you can see areas that need improvement. Texas students rank 41st in the nation. That means 41st, like out of the states. That's not exactly good, but it's just showing that it's just a data point. It's just a detail that can help students learn, that will allow them to figure out where they are, maybe if they're not working hard enough, that they could work harder. Next, we have 26% of students were college ready, and that kind of relates to the 54% of students reading below their reading level. If these students aren't able to read like everyone else in the nation, they probably aren't going to be ready for college. When it says college ready, it's talking about the SAT or ACT, when only 26% of the students were able to pass reading, English, math, and science. So these test results actually reflect college readiness tests. They all flow together. They're accurate in the sense that if they're not reading at their level, they're not all going to be college ready, and that makes sense. So the STAR results actually reflect in real life. They reflect reality. The STAR test doesn't discriminate, actually. There are adaptions for English learners, and percentage of disadvantaged students don't affect scores. As long as both students and teachers are doing their jobs to learn, they're going to be able to do well on this test. And it's not just to do well on this test, it's to see how much they've learned. And that's it. It shows reasonable and helpful information that reflect reality. Like I was saying, it's a standard that's supposed to help schools, that's supposed to help teachers, that's supposed to help the TEA figure out how everyone's doing. And it's not a bad thing. It's just something that's there to help. Okay, so who supports keeping the STAR? So first we have the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, which is the one making people take them. And then we have Pearson, who is administering this test. They won it because they have a $500 million contract. We have Mariah Biosh, who is a Texas student and newspaper contributor. I put her in there so you could see that some Texas students, they like the STAR test. They don't see any harm in it. They actually like it. And then lastly, we have Sean Michael Pigeon, which is a writer, influential writer. So here we have the TEA, Pearson, the girl Mariah Biosh, and then Sean Michael Pigeon. Okay, so the current status of Texas, the standardized testing in Texas, is their annual tests. They go from 3rd grade to 11th grade. Some of these tests prevent graduation. If you can't pass one of your biology or like English 2 EOCs, you're not going to be able to graduate until you finish it. So that is sometimes a hindrance to students who do not like school. Additionally, the STAR is going to be redesigned by the 22-23 school year, which means that it's going to be adapted and it's going to be able to grow with students, technology, with the world really, so it will not be left behind in the dust. All states in the U.S. have standardized tests except for Nebraska. This is not just in Texas. This is like across the whole nation. It's not something new. It's something that all states use to measure their state's education system. Additionally, the STAR test is used in the TEA school report cards, which shows how well these schools are doing within the campus, within the district, and within the state. Okay, so now we have my opinion. I don't think the STAR should be abolished. I believe it provides a guide for students, for teachers, and I don't think there's any harm in taking the test, besides the fact that students can get anxious and that it's stressful. One thing I wish it didn't encourage was teachers teaching for the test, but there's always going to be teachers teaching for the test, and if you don't have it, maybe they won't even be teaching at all. So it's kind of like a give and take. That's my next point. There would be no way to measure schools' progress or teachers' ability. This test is supposed to be helping. It's not. I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a balance where not all students do well, and that's okay because the test isn't everything. As long as the teachers are telling their kids that the STAR test doesn't define who they are, the STAR test doesn't make them a good or bad student. It's just a test. That is just a tool for the TEA to figure out where they are and to figure out if they should even pass the next grade. And that's okay because you don't want students moving on to the next grade if they're not ready for it. So I think it's a useful tool for both students and teachers, and for the TEA, and for everyone, right? I don't think there's anything too bad that it would have to be abolished. Additionally, and lastly, all states use this, at least one form of standardized testing. So if we abolish the STAR, there's going to be another one coming up. It's just a matter of which one, right? So if you abolish the STAR, there's going to be another standardized test. It just depends. It's just going to be something. It's something we have to deal with, I think, even though it can be really annoying. It's something that isn't bad if we think about the good it does for everyone else and standards, making sure that everyone in Texas is learning what they're supposed to be learning. And these are my sources cited. And here's another one.